I want to start with a word. Rarity. A word meant to describe something hard to find, something special. The word as it exists now is sitting under a skin in a store, next to a price and a countdown timer. Somewhere between then and now, the word stopped describing what you did and started describing what you paid. This is that conversation. December of 2012. I was a teenager at my Nona's house 2 weeks off from school for winter vacation, and a whole month late to a game everyone I knew was already deep into. She took me to GameStop that very week and bought me Halo 4. I picked out a bunch of snacks on the way out. Of those snacks was Halo branded Mountain Dew cases that were just then sitting at home. The ones with codes under the cap for double XP. And for those 2 weeks, that soda was basically replacing my blood because I needed to close the gap. Sometime during that week, I saw a guy in a lobby with an emblem I hadn't seen before. It was a skull, but not one of the default ones. It was something sharper, meaner looking. I got on a party chat and told my friends, "Hey, I just saw this guy with some kind of skull emblem. It looked incredible. Does anybody know what that is?" Nobody did. So, I went looking. It turned out it was the Lasso emblem, legendary all skulls on. If you beat the campaign on legendary difficulty with every skull active, you got it. There was also a separate visor you could unlock that was gold, just for finishing the campaign on legendary. But the emblem was the real prize. That was the flex. Because getting it meant you'd actually survive the hard version of the game and not just the difficult one. I spent the rest of that week working through the campaign missions, mission by mission, with a buddy, both of us grinding Lasso for that emblem specifically. We got it eventually, and for about a day, we were the proudest two idiots on Xbox Live. Here's a non sequitur for you guys, but I just can't help but remember this. Think fondly back on it. One of the skulls in Lasso is called Blind. It kills your entire HUD and your crosshair and your weapon model, your hand, basically everything that can be displayed on screen that would be of use to you. Which is great for getting footage of a game, but it is terrible for a challenge run where one death sends you back to the start of the mission. So back in those days, the trick going around at the time was get a sticky note and draw a crosshair on it and put it on the center of your TV where your reticle would normally sit. We had a third buddy of ours for one of the Lasso missions because he wanted to get into the campaign with us. We explained the trick to him. You get a sticky note, you draw a crosshair, and you stick it to the screen. Well, what he heard, or maybe just decided, was that the correct move was to just draw directly on his TV with the Sharpie. He had a crosshair after that permanently, and nobody could take it away from him, even if they wanted to. The three of us went silent on the call for about 2 seconds before we all exploded into laughter. And then he spent the next 20 minutes basically asking us, with real panic in his voice, how to get the Sharpie off of the screen. Fast forward, February 2nd of 2020. I remember the date exactly because it was Super Bowl weekend, San Francisco against Kansas City, and I wanted San Fran to win so badly that I could almost taste it. It was also the same weekend the Philippines reported the first coronavirus death outside of China. One of those two facts the entire world would be living inside of in just 1 month. I spent that weekend trying to solo flawless the Pit of Heresy inside of Destiny 2. It was a dungeon that is typically meant for 3 people. But if you completed it with no deaths and no checkpoints and one clean run from start to finish, you would get an emblem. I had seen somebody with that very emblem and I didn't recognize what it was, so I looked up what it took and spent 2 days retrying before I finally landed the run that counted. 1 hour and 32 minutes, clean. And then I too had that emblem. I believe both of those items carry a rarity border if you were to pull them up today, but that's not really the point. Nobody had to point the border out to me before I wanted it. I didn't know what I was looking at until I asked. And the asking was the whole hook. The rarity of the thing traveled by word of mouth, not by paint on the item. This isn't a story about how things were better in 2012 or 2020, dear viewer. I promise you, I'm not going to tell you nostalgia is a design philosophy. What I am telling you is that for a long stretch of this hobby's history, Rarity was a report. It was the honest residue of something difficult that had already happened. You saw the emblem. You saw the visor, and your brain did the correct thing on its own. It inferred. Nobody had to tell it what to infer. That's not how it works anymore, and I want to spend this episode figuring out exactly when the report became an instruction, because I don't think most players noticed the switch happen. Open a premium store today and you'll find the same 4 or 5 words doing all the work. Common, rare, epic, legendary, mythic, sometimes exotic, sometimes exalted, depending on which studio's marketing team got there first. A color goes with each one. Gray, blue, purple, gold. A sound plays when you unbox it, or maybe a particle effect will ripple across the screen. None of that describes anything that you did, it just describes what you paid. The old model made you infer rarity from context. The new model prints the conclusion directly on the box instead of telling you the skin has a custom idle animation. The store tells you the skin is legendary and lets your brain make the leap it used to make on its own. Except the leap is being made for you now, on purpose, by someone who gets paid when you do so. There's a name for this in behavioral psychology, the framing effect. People assign more value to something presented as scarce or exclusive even when the scarcity is manufactured rather than earned. That's the whole point of the label. And here's where it gets complicated, and I do want to give it the complication it's due instead of just flattening it to something I don't personally like. In Counter-Strike and Dota 2, both ran on rarity tags, and I don't think either of them set out to build the machine that came after them. Dota's Battle Pass predates Fortnite by years, and Counter-Strike's weapon skins run on the same star and color system half the industry copied. Play either game long enough, and you notice the tags don't always match what your eyes are telling you. Some of the mid-tier items look better than the tier above them, and some legendary tag skins are just a base model with a gold border slapped on the top. The label and the actual specialness of the object came apart from each other a long time ago, and once you notice that, you can't stop noticing it. It's not a small detail, but I did want to point it out. It's kind of the whole argument of this episode, hiding in plain sight, inside the games that arguably started this. The tag was never really describing the item, it was just describing where the item sits on a pricing tier the studio had built. Now, picture this. You're sent by the Adventurers Guild to a goblin camp that's taken root in the forest just past the capital. You suit up, you saddle your own steed because he's yours, nobody else's, and that matters to you in a way you can't quite explain to people who don't ride. The chieftain running that camp is on the guild's watch list for crimes I genuinely can't repeat on this channel. You arrive, one against many, a fair fight by the standards of these things. You smirk, dismount, and start walking toward the camp, already deciding whether tonight calls for steel, fists, or maybe something with a little more flair to it. However, someone's already walking out to meet you, covered in the gore of the very camp you were tasked with clearing. It's a knight, built like a doorframe. A brilliant cyan plume sits on top of his helmet. He wipes something off of his gauntlet and says mostly to himself, now that was a proper battle. You look him over anyway, because you notice the sword before you notice anything else about him, and that's not even counting his warhorse standing off to the side with embers trailing off its tail. The sword is on fire, and staying on fire. The kind of thing that shouldn't exist outside of a story somebody tells their grandkids. You ask him, because, well, you have to. Where did you get that? He holds it up like a receipt and not a weapon. "Oh, this? Is the blacksmith's got it on offer right now. 2 gold. He says it casually, like he isn't even holding a sword that looks like it could end the world. You reply simply, "Oh." He mounts back up and rides for the capital. The horse's hooves leave a trail of embers behind him the whole way. No fight earned that sword, and no chieftain, no story sits under it, and nothing you did to deserve looking at it. It's just a price sitting on a shelf on a Tuesday next to a blacksmith who isn't even trying to make it sound dramatic. Gold border, purple border, it doesn't matter. The tag was never describing the sword. It was describing the shelf it would sit on. There's a reason that story works as a fantasy and would read as an accusation if I set it inside a Destiny fire team instead. Older RPGs and older MMOs ran on gear that meant something because you could point at where it came from. You wore the plate you pulled off a dragon. You carried the axe a boss dropped after the fight that took your guild 4 hours and 6 wipes to finish. That gear was diegetic. It reflected your actual walk through the world instead of a purchase you made outside of it. Destiny 2 spent years quietly walking away from that, and it did it in a specific order worth naming. Back when the game was still alive, before you even got to look at your ship, you hit ads. Ads for the current event. Ads for whatever was coming next. Ads for the next expansion if one was on the calendar. You didn't just start playing. Even then, you had to check the Eververse first, because that's where all the good-looking stuff lived, shrunk down to a storefront instead of being dropped into a loot pool. And to play devil's advocate for a moment, technically, it is definitely in the game. It's also just sitting behind a purchase screen. And whether you were feeding this screen silver, Steam wallet funds, or whatever currency your platform prefers to call it that week, now set the store aside entirely and just talk about the Battle Pass, because the same thing happened there without anybody needing to charge extra for it separately. Season of the Undying, October 2019. The first season pass after Destiny 2 had moved to Steam, rank 1 on the premium track, Ariana's Vow. The first hand cannon in the game to run on special ammo. It wasn't a reskin, it wasn't a recolor, an actual functional shift. And it hit hard enough to become the premier weapon for Grandmaster content, the difficulty tier built specifically to punish you for bringing anything less. Intrinsically capable of stripping a barrier champion's shield in one hit. That's not at all flavor text. It's the kind of tool a raid team plans an encounter around. There was no diegetic path to that weapon, no mission, no puzzle, no community rumors spreading through Reddit the way the Whisper of the Worm spread. A secret nobody was told existed until somebody found it by accident and the whole player base went hunting. No, you bought the pass, and there it was, sitting at rank 1, waiting. I do want to be fair here because Destiny did have deterministic exotic drops elsewhere. If you beat a dungeon boss or maybe beat a raid encounter, and if the game felt generous, you'd walk away with the exotic tied to that activity. That's still random, but it's random inside a story. You did the thing, and the thing gave you a chance at the reward. Ariana's Vow skipped that entire contract. How did you get it? Oh, I just picked up the pass. That's the whole answer. There was no encounter behind it, no secret, nothing that makes the answer worth telling somebody. I don't know what other game in this genre gets away with that. Try it in World of Warcraft, sell the best in-slot weapon in the expansion on a battle pass and watch the forums catch fire. Try it in Warframe, the community would treat it as a declaration of war. Destiny did it inside its own mythology. The same game that built its entire identity on legendary weapons with names and lore attached to them, and got away with selling one of those legends at a checkout screen. I think what actually happened is simpler than a leadership memo, and I'll own this as my own read rather than dress it up as something Bungie had said out loud. A live service has to run as a business before it runs as a game. And somewhere in the arithmetic, the entire visual language of an MMO, gear that shows the world what you had survived, got replaced with gear that shows the world what you had paid. Your character stopped being a record of your journey and started being closer to a desktop wallpaper dressed by a storefront instead of earned by a raid. The psychology behind it isn't complicated. A player who can look different from the person standing next to them tends to stick around longer than a player wearing the same default gear as everyone else in the tower. That's just what happens when a studio realizes the fastest way to make you feel invested is to make you feel seen, and the fastest way to make you feel seen is to sell you directly instead of making you earn it. When every game runs common, rare, epic, legend, mythic, whatever we want to call it that week, the words stop carrying information. It's the same failure every over-labeled menu eventually has. Every restaurant's burger is the ultimate deluxe signature supreme. Eventually, the adjectives stop telling you anything about the burger. Call of Duty is the clearest evidence I could ever hope to have, really. A game built around a specific military aesthetic will, roughly a year after its launch, start selling you Beavis and Butthead skins, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles running through a war zone. None of it breaks the store's rules, and none of it needs to look like it's in the game that it was attached to, because by that point, the Rarity system isn't describing the world at all. It's describing an inventory. And Legendary just means the most expensive tier available in this rotation. It could be a licensed cartoon character, it could be a reskinned jacket in a different color. The word does the same job either way. Picture a weapon that shoots acid, glowing rounds, a hiss on impact, the whole thing. 9 people out of 10 who saw that in a lobby would ask where it came from. In Call of Duty's case, the answer isn't a challenge or a grind. It's the Mastercraft bundle sitting in the store. If you buy it, you and a few hundred other people are all now the proud owners of a gun that changes nothing about how the game plays and everything about how it looks when you pull the trigger. I've always found that a little corny in a shooter specifically. Microtransactions make more sense to me in an RPG where you're meant to be seen and meant to want to be seen, where the whole point is developing a character over time. Call of Duty moves you from arena to arena against people you'll likely never see again. Somebody roaming around in a skin that doesn't match the game's overall art direction or tone isn't building an identity in front of an audience that's paying attention. Most of that audience is dead 30 seconds later and queuing into a different lobby. I wish more of these games just, I don't know, gave me a toggle. It's not a boycott at all, it's just an option. Let me only see the base roster or only see cosmetics below a certain rarity. I'm not the target market for a licensed crossover skin, and no amount of nostalgia for the character underneath it changes that. Call of Duty already proved this once. They sold a licensed crossover I actually liked. It was Spawn. I didn't buy it then either. There's also a visual fatigue that sets in once every third player in a lobby is glowing or floating because of an emote or trailing a particle effect in the game's own art direction never accounted for. Legendary items used to stand out precisely because most of what surrounded them didn't. Now the whole lobby is loud, and loud stops being a signal the moment it's the default. Rainbow Six Siege's own pro scene has made a version of this argument formally. Competitive players have pushed back on skins and tournament play specifically because cosmetic noise interferes with reading an opponent at a glance, and several rule sets now restrict matches to default or Pro League skins only for exactly that reason. Dota's the one exception in my own habits, and I think it proves the rule instead of breaking it. I usually don't play a hero I don't have a skin for. That's a real bias I have, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but the difference is the effect has to touch the ability itself cosmetically, not mechanically, before it earns that pull. A skin that changes how a spell looks without changing what it does is still playing the old honest game. A gun that looks like it shoots acid isn't. So here's the part I find funny, in a bleak way. The only cosmetics I'd actually call rare today are the ones you can't buy anymore. Something from an event 3 years gone. Something tied to an achievement so specific most of the player base didn't even bother. Those items are rare the old way, through distribution, not through a label a pricing team assigned to them. Nobody stamped a gold border on them to convince you they mattered. They just aren't available, and that fact alone does more honest work than every tier system currently running. Which brings me to a game that came out this July, because I think it accidentally proves the entire thesis of this episode. Dragon Sword Awakening, developed by Hound 13. It started life in January of 26 as a free-to-play gacha title in South Korea under publisher Webzen. A month in, Hound 13 pulled out of that publishing deal over unpaid fees. Webzen disputed it, filed an injunction to block the game entirely. The injunction failed. Hound 13 came back in July with a completely rebuilt version. No gacha, no stamina system, no character banners, just a straight buy-to-play action RPG where you earned heroes and gear through actually playing the thing. If we read the Steam reviews for a moment, the same sentiment shows up over and over in different words. Strip the gacha out, leave the combat loop, and you get a genuinely good game. Somebody wrote that they'd been begging for a non-gacha game like this for years. Somebody else called it, more or less, the game people wanted Genshin Impact to be, minus the part where you gamble for the characters. I don't think this is a coincidence, and I don't think it's really a story about gacha specifically. It's a story about what happens when a studio rips the entire manufactured status machine out of a game and lets the thing underneath just be good. Players didn't need to be told anything was legendary. They needed the combat to feel good and the gear to come from playing it. That was enough. That was apparently more than enough, given what happened to the studio's concurrent player count the moment they made that choice. If the label mattered as much as the industry claims it does, removing every label should have made the game feel emptier, and it did the opposite. Let's go back to the Lasso emblem and the Crimson Echoes emblem from earlier in this episode. Both of those still mean something to me years later because the memory of the struggle is welded to the object. An item earned through something difficult retains its meaning because the difficulty didn't go anywhere. Not many people did it. Some of these items exist as, well, you just had to be there. I don't love that part for what it's worth. I understand the appeal of prestige to the people defending it, but I think it costs the game more than it protects. I shouldn't be permanently locked out of an armor set because a developer drew a line between this date and that date, and I don't think the answer has to be nothing. A retroactive path back in it doesn't have to trivialize the original achievement. I've got rare items sitting in my own Destiny 2 collection I genuinely believe should come back. Or, well, should have came back for the game's last update. One final door opened before the lights went out, and they just didn't do that. Nobody's ever going to see those again unless you happen to know somebody who knows somebody or you happen to have that rare item. I just find that plainly silly. And I notice how quickly a player base will defend the lockout anyway because they already have theirs. Here's the part that actually undermines the industry's own argument for why any of this should stay locked away. A store-bought rare item only feels special until the next rotation drops, something shinier a week or two later. That is a treadmill. The items aren't rare because they're hard to get, they're just temporarily unavailable, on a timer, built specifically to manufacture urgency instead of earning it. Compare that to an emblem tied to an actual achievement. The achievement doesn't get easier with time, and it doesn't get replaced by the next week's drop. The difficulty is the scarcity. The rotation is just a countdown. There's a bitter irony sitting underneath the whole system too. An item feels rare in direct proportion to how rarely you see it. The entire reason somebody buys a flashy item from the shop is to look different from the lobby around them. Then everybody else buys the same item because the store sold it to everybody. And the lobby that was supposed to make you stand out now makes you look exactly like everyone standing next to you. They paid to be seen and got sorted into a uniform instead. I think a healthier system classifies cosmetics by what they actually do, not by how important they're supposed to make you feel. You have things like standard, which just means no effects. Animated, it moves. Reactive, it responds to something you're doing in the game itself. Mastercrafted, meaning somebody treated it like a genuinely designed piece rather than a recolor. Licensed, when it's collaboration with something outside the game. Bundle, when it's just several of the above packaged together at a discount. Or simplest of all, call it what it is, an outfit. An outfit with effects. An outfit with a new voice line. An outfit with the finisher. Let's actually run it against something real, because a taxonomy that only works in theory isn't worth much, is it? So I had gotten back into Rainbow Six Siege for a stretch this year, killing time while I had waited on Halo Campaign Evolve to land in early access that July. There was an event running called Mute Protocol, a team version of gun game where both sides raced to unlock a final weapon, a breaching hammer normally locked to one specific operator. Riding alongside the mode was a capsule system. Earn cosmetics by playing, or buy them outright, and clearing the full set unlocked a special outfit for one of the operators. Run whatever the store called that outfit through the honest system instead of a marketing one, and here's what's actually being sold. An outfit, tied to a limited time event, no mechanical difference from the base model. Available 2 ways, played for or paid for, landing in the exact same place either way. Strip out whatever word was doing the heavy lifting on the button, mythic, ultra rare, whatever fit that week, and that's just the truth of the object. Nothing about the honest version makes it less desirable. It just stops letting the word do the work the object hasn't earned. None of those words tell you how special you're supposed to feel. They tell you what you're buying. That's the whole difference this episode has been circling since the lasso emblem. The next time a store tells you something is legendary, ask what that word is actually describing, whether it's the item or just the number next to it. I am Agis. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody. I want to thank each of you for tuning in this week. Now that I think about it, I kind of sound like one of those old public broadcast sort of closings. This video was brought to you in part by viewers like you. Thank you. Something like that. Thank you so much for tuning into Volume 2. There's still plenty of more conversations to have. This is going to run into a part 2 of what was initially going to be live service fatigue, but I felt like this was kind of its own argument, and this was just something that was more sitting on the top of my head at the time. Next week's episode is going to be essentially a remaster of the pilot for this channel, which was the live service problem, where I discussed my qualms with live service, my qualms with the industry, and I liked the way that episode turned out, but the audio in that wasn't very good. The editing in that was pretty bare bones comparatively to where I'm at now with the channel. And my writing is a lot better, I would say, going, week to week. So I wanted to try my hand at it, and I was going to essentially remaster the pilot and kind of bring up a few more things that I didn't cover during that episode, as well as kind of give a more grandiose nod to Marathon. I seem to make people really upset or very introspective whenever I bring up Marathon on this channel, so we'll see where that lands, I suppose. As I said, there are still plenty more conversations to have. But until then, all I can tell you is thanks for watching.